Hello YouTube and welcome to this episode of Concerning the Godzilla Vlog.
What?
What the fuck was that? I just fucked up my own opening.
Did you seriously just do that?
I did.
I got a little confused when he said that. I'm like, wait a minute.
What is Concerning the Godzilla Vlogs? I don't give a shit about that. Hello YouTube, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions and welcome to this episode of Concerning the Godzilla Saga. We're here to talk about the reporter characters from the first novel, Godzilla and King Kong. First we have John Archer, who is personally my favorite character from Godzilla and King Kong. I had a blast writing him, but he was born in Washington State, and Archer was born to a single mother. He never knew who his real father was, and his mother would refuse to tell him if he was ever curious and asked about him throughout his life until he even left. But he respected his mother's wishes and just kind of kept that in the back of his mind and eventually forgot about the fact that he didn't really know his father, nor did he know who he was or that he even existed. When he was 6, his mother married a man from Massachusetts, in which they moved there when he was 8 years old to a smaller town. Archer had wanted to work in movies from a young age. His mother brought him an old video camera and he would videotape anything he found interesting, be it something in the garden, be it a bug, or be it just him running around acting like a complete idiot. He ignored much of school and found it a waste of his time. He nearly failed all of his classes, passing with only C's and D's. It never stopped him from shooting anything though with his video camera. As soon as he turned 18, against the wishes of his mother, though quietly supported by his stepfather, he got a plane ticket he saved up for, in which he worked several hours since he was 13 every summer. And he flew to Hollywood and looked for a job. It was a tremendous risk, but to John Archer, at the age of 18, he saw that as a positive and he was willing to take the risk. For 3 years, he barely made it by. He worked on several low-budget indie films as a grip. He worked at a hot dog stand to get the rest of his money and to manage to pay for his little bit of rent. He refers to this time as his proudest moment in his life. He began to feel proud of what little he had because he knew it was his, which was a very important emotion for John Archer, which helped form a philosophy for the rest of his life. That philosophy of what is his and he earned it. John Archer got his first major true break in the industry when the Second Iraq-Iran War was declared, and he became a cameraman for the new station NRUN. They were desperate and in need of coverage at the time. So he went over there to the front lines, where he was actually shipped over to Iraq to videotape and document what was happening. Here, John Archer filmed his first movie, Real War, which filmed many atrocities of the war, such as women being raped, children being shot, children being used for human shields, not just by Americans, but also by people in Iraq and Iran themselves. NRUN made his footage into a feature film, in which won Archer several television awards and worldwide notoriety. And he was also credited for sparking the anti-militarist viewpoint in the United States, which, if you want to know more about that, watch the first episode of Concerning the Godzilla Vlogs, where we talk solely about the Second Iraq-Iran War, which sets the stage for the first novel in the Godzilla Saga. So anyways, because this sparked an anti-militarist viewpoint in the United States, John Archer was viewed as a hero to the movement, though Archer never really cared. This gave him free rein in NRUN to basically do whatever he wanted. He began to film strange and exotic places as a chance to explore the world. His personal favorite of these places was the Galapagos Islands, where he taped several strange new species and absolutely adored the peacefulness of those islands. And he always wanted it to be in his life that he'd go there again, where he would stay close by, and that is where he planned on retiring. It is on these journeys that Archer learned of an entire scientific crew that were missing in the Pacific while reading a newspaper. This piqued his interest, and Archer found himself a very curious man and decided to dig a little further into what happened, and he decided that this would be his next expedition, which brings us to the beginning of Godzilla and King Kong. Then we have Richard Kelly, who is John Archer's assistant in Godzilla and King Kong. Richard Kelly was born on Long Island to a wealthy family. They worked in a nuclear reactor business which boomed during the Second Iraq-Iran War, which basically made his family, the Kellys, billionaires overnight, because nuclear fission and nuclear power was becoming a very promising alternative to the oil industry because of the Second Iraq-Iran War. He went to a private school for most of his education. What happened was basically Richard Kelly at this time took an interest in still photography, not so much film, but still photography, and began taking pictures of school events. He began to earn his own money by taking still photographs for Broadway actors and wedding photos. That was throughout high school and even a little bit into college. But anyways, after a while he got sick and bored of college and he dropped out, where he was studying to be an accountant. He was quickly hired by a local TV station to take pictures of the presidential election. Basically what happened was Richard Kelly began to take some of the most famous pictures of the nominee Harry S. York. However, Richard never wanted to do this. He found this very boring and very pretentious. He wanted to explore the world. Richard was bored of just taking political pictures. He wanted to explore his boundaries more to see what he could do, because he felt very limited with what his job was having him do. He was picked up by NRUN because of these pictures of the presidential election, and he immediately took it. He saw it as an opportunity to explore the world more. He sought a job working with none other than John Archer. After 3 years of working at NRUN, his dream came true. Archer spotted Richard's talent and ambitions, and hired Richard as an assistant on his travels around the world. Richard was absolutely ecstatic by this and took up the opportunity without question. Together, they documented many places, Richard's first being at the Antarctic. Richard found himself working as a balancing act for Archer. Archer was willing to do anything, and I mean anything, to get the shots he wanted. Richard was more pragmatic. Found himself often clashing with Archer, though both men agreed that Richard admitted that he loved working with Archer despite this. Thinks of this as the best job in the world despite some of the problems that it creates. He has never been happier in his entire life. Richard is proud that together they are the most sought-after television team in the entire world. Which brings us to the beginning of Godzilla and King Kong. This man is not necessarily a reporter, but he's important in terms of the characters of the reporters of John Archer and Richard. And that is Captain Joshua Lawrence Sweet. He was named Joshua Lawrence after Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, who was a famous colonel during the American Civil War, who eventually turned into a general and eventually became governor of Maine. But he was born in an American military base in Japan to a Japanese-American mother. The father was a soldier who was stationed there, making Sweet 1/3 Japanese. When his father was decommissioned, he moved to California after his father's tour of duty was complete, and he stayed there until he graduated high school. Sweet was a typical student. He got straight B's and was quiet in class. Though more physical than most, Sweet loved reading. He also loved playing sports and he loved lifting weights, but he absolutely loved reading. And he read a lot of military books based on tactics, such as Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And he enjoyed the idea of the Navy. One of his heroes was Admiral Nelson from the Napoleonic era. So basically what happened was Sweet joined the Navy as soon as he graduated from high school. He would always joke about this with his father, considering the fact that his father was a member of the United States Army. And he worked his way up to becoming a commissioned officer and took classes to make this so. And he took several classes to make this so at his own expense. He became a captain aboard the USS Cygnus, a B-class destroyer. As captain of the Cygnus, he was stern. He was very regimental at first, but relaxed as time went on, and he wanted to make sure to show to his men that he could be mean when necessary, but he could be the father figure they desperately needed sometimes when they needed his help. And he also needed to be the true authority figure, and he fulfilled those roles very well. His men basically, as a result, earned his respect, and eventually they all did. So he didn't just hand out respect, he demanded it, and as a result, he got the respect from the crew, as well as he began to respect his crew as well. It was a very mutual thing that was going on here, and Sweet was very good at it. During the Second Iraq-Iran War, Sweet was in charge of guarding supply lines near Kuwait. During a scheduled checkup, an IED exploded aboard the ship. Sweet was horribly injured across his chest and face, and he nearly lost one of his eyes. The explosion killed 3 other of his sailors. Sweet always felt guilty for this and thought he should have searched harder and looked harder at the supplies that were coming aboard the ship. The explosion affected his eyesight on his right eye. It left nasty scar tissue there as well. And as a result, because he was nearly blind in his right eye, he was honorably discharged as a result, much to Sweet's protest. Sweet did not want to leave. He felt it was also his duty to both his men, his ship, as well as his country to remain in the army. But unfortunately, he had to be honorably discharged because of the bad eyesight in his right eye as a result of his injury. Sweet hated this, but accepted it without question. Knew he wouldn't be much use half blind. Sweet returned to California to a mob throwing eggs at him, which is very important. It would shape his opinion and outlook on his life for the remainder of his story. He had to be dragged off a young college student. Basically what happened was a kid spat in his face. Sweet jumped onto the college student and literally beat him to a pulp, and if it wasn't for the fact that a couple other naval officers were there to pull him off, he probably would have killed the kid. Which was a mixture of not just, the kid throwing eggs and spitting in his face, but also a mixture of his frustration of having to be honorably discharged from the Navy prematurely. As a result, though, Sweet was luckily not charged with the assault due to his service overseas. Sweet then took to drinking as he continued to watch the news of how badly things were going for the war, and desperately wanted to join his friends over there, and eventually he learned that the USS Cygnus was actually destroyed in a suicide bombing. He basically felt terrible as a result, and many times he actually wished he was dead as well, which only made his drinking worse. And to make matters worse, at home he was not viewed as being, a protector of a country. He was viewed as nothing more than a baby killer. One night, Sweet drank himself into a coma, and he woke up after being out for nearly a week. And he was brought to the hospital by a friend, also with the first name Joshua, so they both had the name Josh, though he called him Joshua. They became drinking buddies when both had to be discharged. Both of them had to be discharged due to injuries, and both of them got along quite well, though Joshua was quite a bit younger than Mr. Sweet, than Captain Sweet. They then lived together for a few months to get some things settled. This event both woke men up that things needed to change. So both men were drinking buddies, and then after Sweet fell into a coma, both Joshua and Sweet realized that they needed to wake the fuck up and do something. Both looked for a job at sea again. Sweet sobered up with the help of Joshua, got hired to help ships and protect goods moving between the United States and Mexico. As work steadily increased, so did his pay. He began to hire other ex-naval officers and Navy sailors to help him out. Became a paramilitary-like organization as a result. He had mainly the backing of oil tycoons, which paid extremely well. But as the Second Iraq-Iran War came to a close, the oil industry began to lose their profits. And as a result, Sweet began to lose business. What happened was Sweet eventually had to sell 2 out of his 3 ships to keep his business afloat, and always kept Joshua by his side, always keeping him as a second-hand man. Felt it repayment for basically saving his life. That was when Sweet met John Archer on a shoot on the Panama Canal. Archer was in desperate need of a vessel to transport him around the world and work for cheap. Sweet, having basically no other choice, saw this as an opportunity to make some money and accepted Archer's offer with open arms. They now work together on just about every voyage and every shoot, and Sweet saw this as a very steady source of income to both sustain the ship, keep it up to date, as well as being able to pay his sailors, or the people that worked under him. And thus that brings us to the beginning of Godzilla and King Kong. Yay! So those are all the major characters in Godzilla and King Kong. I'm not sure where to go forward in the Godzilla Saga, concerning the Godzilla Saga from here on out. I might talk about some weaponry, I might talk about some politics, but I'm not really sure. This was the last of the character videos, and that was all the major characters. There are actually quite a few. But again, I just want to emphasize that I treat these books like history books. Though they are fiction, don't get me wrong, I treat them as if these are real events that actually happened and play them out as such. I treat them like a docudrama. an idea where things happen, and this is how. Very plot-heavy books. So there are a lot of main characters, but I promise you it will be easy to follow as soon as you start reading the novels. So go on Facebook, like AN Productions for all up-to-date information about what we're doing there. Like the Godzilla Saga for all up-to-date information on how the novels are going. They are almost completed. In fact, we only have one book left to really beta read, and that is Godzilla vs. Biollante, and then we're done. Yeah, we're that close, ladies and gentlemen. So, we're getting there. What the hell am I going to do when that's done? I don't know. Probably going to work on a couple of smaller books and smaller stories, because, let's face it, the Godzilla Saga is a huge, huge story. Join Geeks for Geeks if you wish to have nerdy conversations, or you have something you want to promote that you create. A place where you can do that freely and no one will judge you, and is a place where you can possibly network with people all over the country. And in the end, this is Adam Noyce of AN Productions saying, sayonara.